Restoring men in history. Donald Trump says we will not comply. And that goes into, if you're looking back to the 1700s, Sam Adams, Patrick Henry did not comply. And that goes back to Cato's letter 1722 that we're going to read 73. But let's look at Donald Trump.
The left-wing lunatics are trying very hard to bring back COVID lockdowns and mandates with all of their sudden fear-mongering about the new variants that are coming. Gee whiz, you know what else is coming? An election. They want to restart the COVID hysteria so they can justify more lockdowns, more censorship, more illegal drop boxes, more mail-in ballots, and trillions of dollars in payoffs to their political allies heading into the 2024 election. Does that sound familiar? These are bad people. These are sick people we're dealing with. But to every COVID tyrant who wants to take away our freedom, hear these words: we will not comply. So don't even think about it. We will not shut down our schools. We will not accept your lockdowns. We will not abide by your mask mandates. And we will not tolerate your vaccine mandates. They rigged the 2020 election, and now they're trying to do the same thing all over again by rigging the most important election in the history of our country, the 2024 election, even if it means trying to bring back COVID. But they will fail because we will not let it happen. When I'm back in the White House, I will use every available authority to cut federal funding to any school, college, airline, or public transportation system that imposes a mask mandate or a vaccine mandate. Thank you very much.
So, bold message from Donald Trump. We will not comply. We will not shut down our schools. We will not accept your lockdowns. Lockdowns, how much business was lost from the small business person? How much damage was done psychologically? We will not shut down our schools. How many kids were damaged and are now behind in reading? Well, the stats are out. It's bad. We will not abide by your mask mandates. We will not tolerate your vaccine mandates, experimental jabs, right? Donald Trump. Okay, so this is a good, strong video on we will not comply. Sam Adams, Patrick Henry didn't comply.
If you like these videos, please like, comment, subscribe, and hit the notification button, and we'll keep making them.
So Trump talks about tyrants. So let's define Webster's tyrant. An absolute ruler, unrestrained by law or constitution. So we have a United States Constitution here if we demand that people follow it, right? We have to demand that people follow it because elected politicians don't really like to follow it, a lot of them. A usurper of sovereignty, all right? So we could go into that for a long time. A ruler who exercises absolute power oppressively or brutally. So you see any of these during COVID. One resembling an oppressive ruler in the harsh use of authority or power. So did you see any governors or any people act like this 2020 and 2021? That's a tyrant. Now let's look at the reverse and people who, and by the way, you can come over to the freedom sign now if you put on a mask. To comply is what? To conform, submit, or adapt as to a regulation or another's wishes as required or requested. Now remember, we have a constitution in America and we have unalienable rights. We do not get our rights from government. We get them from God. To conform, submit, or adapt as to a regulation or another's wishes as required or requested. So what does this mean? We will not comply. We will not comply, meaning if you go into a business, if they happen, and we don't know that they're going to bring this back. However, Newsweek has a list here. We'll put this up. Okay, U.S. mask mandates return. Full list of places with restrictions in place by Khalida Rahman, 8/29/23 at 11:21 a.m. Newsweek.com. This, she lists some of the colleges, places that are going to have mask mandates. You can see it there. We don't need to go through it. The point is, I don't know if this is going to happen or not. Is it going to happen? Here's the point. Do not comply in terms of the Constitution, or do not comply if it breaks your state constitution. A mandate is not a law. So here's the point. We need to get in the American spirit of Patrick Henry and Sam Adams and call out when the federal government or someone peacefully breaks the Constitution. All this is peaceful. It's nonviolent. Not yelling at people, just talking to people, talking to your local representative and say, follow the Constitution. It's talking to people in a peaceful way to move them. Not violent, not yelling, not angry, logical, Okay. So Cato's letters, written 1722, this one 73. Gordon and Trenchard wrote these different letters, and they're all about freedom and tyranny, and they're really pretty phenomenal. I've read many of them, and this one's pretty good. So he's talking about the subject of liberty and tyranny, pretty important for today. Rings true because why? Tyrants and totalitarians always are through history, and it's always a battle of the freedom side versus the anti-freedom side, the tyrant, the totalitarian side, who want to control you, regulate you, tell you how you live your life, tell you what kind of car to drive. You can't drive a V8, you can't drive a V12 because we're going to make a lot of money by selling solar panels or this or that, right? So, Liberty and Tyranny, 73, a noble subject, superior to all others. And listen to this, it's good writing. As to the greatest genius, but fit for the consideration of every genius and every rank of men. It concerns the whole earth. And look what happened during COVID. The whole earth went in on what? Tyranny. And children ought to be instructed in it as soon as they are capable of instruction. What if we were instructing children in freedom and not instructing them in transgenderism and sexualization and all these? Marxism. Why should, and this is a great question, not the knowledge and love of God. Now think back, 1700s, how much they loved God and focused on God. Knowledge and love of God be joined to the knowledge and love of liberty. Knowledge and love of God, knowledge and love of liberty. Think if we valued those two things, right? If every home in America taught God and the Constitution and liberty, where would we be as a nation? At home, not a federal government issue. His best gift, which is the certain source of all the civil blessings in this life. And I've shown that religion cannot subsist without it. So what's he saying there? You got to have the knowledge and love of liberty for religion to exist. See? And why should not the dread and hatred of Satan, now this is pretty powerful comment he makes, the dread and hatred of Satan be accompanied with the dread and hatred of, you know what he says? Tyrants. So he's comparing the dread and hatred of Satan to the dread and hatred of tyrants. Who are whose instruments? Satan's instruments, he says. This is Cato's letter. And the instruments of all the civil miseries in this life. So in your life, he's saying all your miseries are going to come from a tyrant. I've often thought that the barbarians who worship the devil must have borrowed their idea of him from the character and behavior of their own princes. One might indeed defy anything out of hell or even in it, and all they're in it, to do half the mischief, and get this is pretty powerful, upon this earth that tyrants do. So this is pretty lambasting of tyrants, and how we need to guard against them, right? We will not comply means don't let it slip away, because tyrants and totalitarians will take more and more. It doesn't go the other direction. Once you start, and you really can't truly give up your rights because they're from God, but once you start giving your governments more power, and all this can be done peacefully with ideas. We can win with truth and ideas peacefully, non-violently, not with yelling, not with screaming, no closing down of roads, just talking to people. They reduce mankind to the condition of what? Brutes, and make that reason which God gave them, and this is a great point, useless to them. What do? They reduce mankind to the condition of brutes and make that reason which God gave them useless to them. Have you seen that? Kind of a degeneration of thinking, like, and everybody going all in one direction with the super narrative. Got to question the super narrative. Will not comply means question the super narrative. We will not comply means get your kids out of schools that teach transgenderism or that sexualize students and teach sex education too early, right? Or you're going to have to take over the school boards. And that's a problematic thing, whether it's charter or not. Remember what we say, charter or not. Marxism dominates the charter and the public schools, which are part of that system. They're just charter. They deprive them of even the blessings of nature, starve them in the midst of plenty, and frustrate the natural bounty so that nature smiles in vain where tyranny frowns. The hands of men given them by nature for their support are turned by tyrants and instruments of their own misery. Now, we saw that, right? Now, think back in 2021, 22, what you saw. People riding alone in a car with a mask on. People walking in gym with a mask. Still to this day, last week, guys in my gym with a mask on. Big guys with masks, right? Vile drudgeries, destructive wars. Oh, here's the destructive wars, right? Tyrants and the instruments of their business by being employed in the vile drudgeries or destructive wars. Now, what are the neocons like? What are they like? War, right? Military industrial complex likes what? War. Tyrants like war. To gratify the lust and vanity of their lords, who suffer neither religion, nor virtue, nor knowledge, nor plenty, nor any kind of happiness. Nothing that is good or desirable. Now remember, this is 1722. Have you seen this? Nothing that is good or desirable can subsist under tyrants, nor within their reach. So we're not going to read all this letter. I think we've hit some high points. I don't think we'll do the whole. It's a long piece. But they are supported by general. Let's give you a few more quotes. They are supported by general ruin. And I wanted to give you a Sam Adams quote. They live by the destruction of mankind. So what are tyrants doing? Destruction. What happened to San Francisco? What happened to Los Angeles? What happened to Chicago? You don't even want to live there. People are moving out. They're depopulating those areas, right? Because there's no rule of law, really. Or they don't enforce the laws on the books. So you see the destruction where tyrants are in charge. Now, people are voting for that, but nevertheless, you see the destruction of San Francisco, Los Angeles, Chicago, New York City. You can't even live there. They're inhospitable. They're depopulating, right? People are moving out. As fraud and villainy, what is this a mark of? Fraud and villainy, the mark of a tyrant, right? Violence and cruelty, the marks of a tyrant. Mao, Stalin, what were they doing? Hitler. Props of their throne. So they measure, now this is a good point. We say it a lot here. They measure their own happiness and security and strength by what? By the misery and weakness of the people. We really believe that it makes them feel better when you're awful, right? The elites, the powers that be, when they're making you and taking your money, I think they feel better. And if you're miserable and weak, it's easier to control you, right? So if you're poor and weak, it's easier to control you. Every act by the tyrant renders the people poor, abject, and wretched. Now, where are the most poor people and where are they most abject? You want to think about San Francisco, Chicago, New York? Who's ruling those cities? Now watch this. Watch what he says. By these and like inhuman means, the countries of tyrants are come to be in the condition which I have elsewhere described, desolate, uncultivated, proper receptacles for savage monsters. And that's what's happening, right? You've had the riots in those cities, and look what happened. Ravening beasts of prey who rather choose to live in barren fields, unhospitable deserts, empty towns, right? So that happens too. They eventually, he's talking about through history, become empty. And what counts? They at one time possessed inhabitants who had liberty and they were bold enough to defend it. So if you want to stop a tyrant, you've got to have you, the men and the women, stand up peacefully and stand against it and be bold enough to defend it. And we have a constitution here that we can defend. Now he makes a line. Now where can all this dismal ruin, this growing depopulation end? If a continued decay in the natural body certainly ends in the extinction of life, and what can a continued and hasty decay of mankind end? Now, who's been talking about the end of man, right? Isn't it that? Go into the Great Reset, Yuval, then you've got Klaus Schwab. You will own nothing and be happy. Klaus Schwab. Yuval has another line about something about God becoming God. So anyway, tyrants. Let's go back to this piece, 73. Several new tyrannies have sprung up like so many new plagues. So watch with tyranny what he says. As with tyranny, like every other full-grown mischief, becomes more and more insupportable every day. The condition of mankind under it becomes must necessary and actually does grow worse and worse. So look, here's the thing. Unless you stand, we will not comply. We will not give up our Constitution. It will get worse and worse each day. Tyranny will grow unless you peacefully stand opposed to it. That's the point of this. It will just get worse and worse. You will lose more and more freedoms. So we have to stand for our freedoms and liberties like Sam Adams and Patrick Henry and George Washington did. So he talks about going through these countries, and he says, what can be more affecting than this instant? Not a single soul to be met with in a vast and noble country, which a few centuries ago was a potent empire. So it's an interesting comparison. And he talks about going through, and they used to contain millions of people and be a great empire, and they're nothing now. We don't want that to be America. We want to save America. We love America. So it's up to us not to become that, of what he talks about through this piece. And we're not going to go through the whole book. It's a book. Now watch this. I like this line. Tyranny has engrossed almost the whole earth, and we just saw that, right? We saw Australia. We saw all these different countries completely shutting down. We had red, blue states, a few states where you had a lot more freedom. So we had federalism at work, right? Federalism helped save the United States of America because they pushed back. Tyranny has engrossed almost the whole earth, and striking at mankind, root and branch, makes the world what? A slaughterhouse. Powerful language and powerful words. And will certainly go on to destroy till it is either destroyed itself, and who has to destroy it, or, which is most likely, has nothing else to destroy. So it's up to you to stand and take away tyranny's power. Now watch what he says happens if you go into tyranny, which are supported by numbers and then degenerated into absolute savages. They will live straggling and naked in the woods and wilderness like wild beasts. Well, today it might be in little tiny smart cities, but devoured by them, devoid, hunger, perish, devour one another. There is a division going on where they're trying to divide everybody against each other. And thus there will be the end of men. Unless those states that are yet free preserve, unless you men rise up, right? Unless you men stand peacefully and rise up peacefully in the midst of this general waste, their own liberties and people. So liberty has to be defended peacefully. So he goes on to say that tyrants are the constant, regular, and necessary cause of what? Waste in the world. And you saw it. Look how many businesses were closed and wasted during COVID tyranny. How many people, I saw the interviews of some people that had been their grandfather, their father, and they lost the business and the articles, lost everything they had because of that government shutdown. Now, he says this interesting line: if God Almighty had left it to Satan to invent an engine for destroying the world and for defacing everything beautiful, good, and desirable in it, and we talk about the good, the beautiful, the true, that minister of vengeance, an enemy to God and man, would have doubtless have invented tyrants. So pretty powerful. And we talk about who's creating the good, the true, the beautiful, who's on that side. And who's trying to reverse it, right? And you go back to Isaiah 5:22, where they reverse good and evil, right? Woe to those who call good evil and evil good. And then the other line is changing beauty, right? The definition of beauty. So reversing everything. The breath of a tyrant blasts and poisons everything, changes blessings and plenty into curses and misery. Great cities into gloomy solitudes. Rich citizens into beggars and vagabonds. So we don't want that here. We want to stand peacefully now and prevent that. And at the end, he says, "Oh, liberty, oh, servitude." Liberty or servitude? It's up to you to maintain it. Liberty is salvation in politics, as slavery is reprobation. I want to give you an in with a couple of Sam Adams quotes today. The liberties of our country, the freedom of our civil constitution, are worth defending against all hazards. And it is our duty to defend them against all attacks. So you're defending it for your children, your grandchildren, and the posterity of America. I want to say something else here. This is another interesting quote that held up during COVID and the misinformation fact checkers. How strangely will the tools of a tyrant pervert the plain meaning of words? Sam Adams. Now look the language that was constructed for your safety for this during COVID. Sam Adams, how strangely will the tools of a tyrant pervert the plain meaning of words? Think about that. Men can be women, women can be men. It's for your safety. And lastly, I'm going to end with this piece because there's hopeful. Look, we have the truth. If we stand, and how do you do that? We will not comply. Don't support a business if they come back with the mask mandates. We don't know that it's going to be that, but here's the thing about tyrants. They'll come up with something else. Remember how everybody jumped from, they had said, we don't trust the media, but then jumped and put up the Ukraine flag? They were all in. We don't want that anymore. What's next? What's going to be the next way the tyrants confuse you? And remember, we have a constitution here. We just want to follow it. We just want to be legal and follow the Constitution and stand peacefully. That's what we want to do. It does not take a majority to prevail, but rather an irate, tireless minority keen on setting brush fires of freedom in the minds of men. So how do we win? How do we win on the freedom side? Get men thinking about freedom, how to value it. Keen on setting brush fires of freedom in the minds of men. Notice that? Nonviolent. just talking to people, setting brush fires of freedom in the minds of men. That's what we do. That's how we win. We have the truth. We just need to go out there and talk to everybody we can about freedom. And there's other steps, of course, but it's all peaceful. We win with peaceful ideas. So I don't know what's going to come next, but you have to have a plan in place. You can't just say we will not comply. You have to have a plan in place for your family on how you're not going to comply, right? You have to have a strategic plan. Set that up. How are you going to feed your family? How are you going to do that? And you don't have to support businesses that have a mask mandate. I remember standing at the front of Federal Express over and over and over, and I'd be the only one without a mask on. I remember that. I will never forget it. So talk to people, everybody you can, about freedom, because we have the right side, freedom. Climate control is another way to control you. It's another way that tyrants use to force you into an electric car to then, Pete just said it the other day, eventually we don't want you in a car, which we had said a long time ago. The goal is not to get you to an electric car. The goal is against you out of cars altogether. We believe in freedom. You want a V8, get it. You want a V12, get it. We're the fun side, you know. If you want to smoke a cigar, smoke it. If you want to go shoot guns, you go shoot guns. We're the freedom side. We're the fun side. See, they're no fun. Don't shoot guns. Don't smoke cigars. Don't do anything fun. Right? The fun freedom side. If you like this video, comment, like, subscribe. It helps the algorithm, and we would appreciate it. Thank you.